All right, hi everyone. Today I'm going to go over some basic acrylic painting techniques with you. First, we're going to go over scumbling. So this is a thin, opaque layering technique. The beautiful thing about acrylic, I think about acrylic is that you could layer it. It dries quickly, so it really lends itself to layering. And the first way that we're going to talk about layering is scumbling. So this is a thin, opaque layer. So I just take a dry brush and I dip it into some opaque paint. And the goal is to put just a thin layer of opaque paint down. So you see how you could see the paper underneath it because I'm letting there be air, letting there be space between the opaque paint that I put on there. So the red layer, you can see the blue layer coming through it. It kind of makes it purple. Again, really kind of a dry brush here, and I'm not adding water to my paint. So it's thin, opaque. The next way that we're gonna add some layers onto our painting is impasto. So this is a thick, opaque paint, and has a lot of texture. It's physical. It's really physical. So looks like this. If you think of painters like, or if you see the work of Van Gogh in person, his work has a lot of impasto or thickness to it. So when it dries, it'll have that craggy feel. Washes, these are thin, transparent layers. So you're going to add water to your paint to make a wash. So it's thin, and you can see through it. Looks like that. And let's say I have an under drawing here. I could use the wash on top and change the color or value of it easily. I really like the chaos of it, but it might drive some of you crazy. If you like to control your work, then washes might be it might be annoying. So in other words, you could build up the layers slowly, which is really great, but the chaos of the material might be kind of annoying to you. So just something to keep in mind. Glazes, these are thick, transparent layers. So for these, you want to use, a matte medium or a gel medium. And you take a little bit of that, you put it on the side, and you mix your paint into it. So take a little bit of paint, don't add water to it, just take a little bit of your paint and put it into the medium. And the reason we do that is because if you do the opposite, if you put the medium into the paint, then you end up wasting a lot of paint to get it just right. So always start with the medium and put your paint into it, or if you're working with colors here, always start with the white and add color to it, otherwise you waste a lot of white. Anyway, so back to the glaze here. So it's basically just the glaze plus paint. You don't have to add water. And then I have some dried paint here. I'm just going to go over it to show you what a glaze looks like. So as you can see, it's shifting that bright red to a slightly more cool purpley red by using the glaze. Dry brush technique. Kind of showed you that with scumbling, but basically you just take a dry brush and you can make these great textures. Kind of lends itself to textures and building up the color slowly. So dry brush. Sgraffito combing technique. Basically for that, you just need to put down a layer of paint and carve back into it. So I'm layering some of this blue on here, blue and brown here. I'm using a palette knife to draw back into it. So it's a combing, drawing technique almost. And I know a lot of ceramicists use sgraffito, but it's great for painting too. Wet into wet. So in watercolor, a lot of times you will put down an area of water and then put the paint right into it and let it bleed to where the water is. You can do that with acrylic. In oil painting, a lot of times you hear the phrase wet into wet when you're doing plein air painting. So plein air painting is where you go to the park and you paint the park right there on site. And it's a fast process, and you let the paints mix in with one another right there on the surface. So that's kind of a wet into wet. And the colors mix and the values mix, and it's challenging and fun, and so that's wet into wet. Masking. So masking is when you're basically just reserving one area from the paint. So I've used some tape here. I'm going to use a little bit of the gel medium to fill in the microscopic gap around the tape. This, you might have known if you've tried this before, sometimes the paint gets under the tape. Well, the clear matte medium, put that on first, and you will have the clear paint going underneath the tape, not the colored paint. So it'll kind of make it for a nice clean edge. So little painting trick. So basically, and then you layer it on just like that. And then peel off your tape. Nice clean edge. You could let it dry and it won't tear like that. But for the demo, it's good. So that's masking. Stamping and stenciling. So I've made a little stencil here, a little heart stencil out of some cardboard. You can make something more complex for sure. But just getting some paint going while it's all mixed together. That's okay. And then just use a stencil. This is nice if you want a repeated shape too. Boom. You could also use stamps, so you could use a sponge to stamp. Basically, whatever, experiment, try different things. Try a pen dipped in paint. Make some nice circles. Glossy versus matte. So right here I just have some paint, some blue paint on there. And if you want the surface of your painting to be glossy, all you need to do is get a glossy medium. I have this pouring medium, which actually is very glossy, so I'm just going to use that. But Liquitex, Blick, they all make different glossy mediums that you could try out. So it'll make for a really shiny surface. I think you might be able to see that. So it's really shiny versus the matte of the paint. So just a nice little trick. It's kind of like varnishing with an oil painting. Hard versus soft edge. So if you have, here we go. So nice hard edge looks like this. So a hard edge brush stroke. It's a very clean edge on either side. Clear definition between the paint and the paper. Soft edge, on the other hand, softer. So the hard edge, you can see where it would be good for like architectural things, whereas the soft edge is more organic things, sunsets, sand, splatter. For this, it's obviously very messy. So what you could do is block off certain areas that you don't want to get your splatter on. So I'm going to block it off here and here. And I'm just dipping my paintbrush I've heard that a dry paintbrush works best. I could see that. Dip it in the paintbrush or dip it in the paint. And then, honestly, I think just a stiff, like short bristle brush would work fine as well. So a dry brush or a stiff bristle brush. And then you're just using your thumb on it like that. Of course it's not working. Okay. Here we go. Boom, boom, boom. Oh, and toothbrushes work really well too. Okay, and then you can pick up the paper. It's protected the area around it. Okay, so there we go. 12 acrylic painting techniques for you to try. I would encourage you to make a grid just like this. Try them out. Maybe put it on the wall next to your workstation. Give you something to reference and give you ideas with your painting. All right. Take care.